Have you ever had an interest in leading and building a community? Whether it's working locally as a student activist or internationally advocating for our diaspora. These are the aspects we'll be exploring in season 2 of the Teens Talk podcast. My name is Lameese Makkawi. I'm a virtual intern for Youth Celebrate Diversity, and I'll be hosting every episode this season. In this episode, I'm joined with Ellie Younger, where we will be discussing community and disability. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Teens Talk. This season is about community building. Community is the backbone of culture. The right community provides you with much needed love and support. Everyone needs a community, and it can look different all over the world. The important thing is building a community with the right intention, as well as understanding the possible obstacles you could face. Join with me is Ellie Young. I will let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, all right. My name is Ellie. I use they, them pronouns. I am a senior at University of Michigan, or I guess not really a senior. I'm graduating this weekend, so I don't really know what my grade is. Um, and I'm currently I just finished studying psychology. I love to read. I'm passionate about creating a better world. And I'm excited to be here today.
Well, I'm even more excited to have you here. Um, Of course. No, I've heard a lot about, some of the things you're passionate about, like you said. I wanted to kind of start just with asking, what are some of the, I guess, I don't want to just say clubs, programs, or organizations, but like what are some kind of groups maybe or communities you're a part of that kind of advocate or work towards some of the things that you're passionate about?
Yeah, so some of the things I'm a part of, a big one is I work at the Office of Student Conflict Resolution at my school, which is really one of the coolest things I've done. Being able to work, we work with people, faculty, students, anyone who comes into the office who has a conflict, we help them use different conflict mediation skills using restorative justice techniques to solve their conflict. Um, One of my biggest wins this year was I got the office. I jumped through so many hoops, so many barriers, and I finally got the office to get a new accessible machine operated door. So we're finally going to be accessible for people to enter our office, which is something that I've been working on for a long time. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also part of our school's um, sexual assault awareness prevention and awareness center, our bystander intervention section of that, where I like basically give workshops to different groups of people in bystander intervention. And then I've been a part of some other clubs here and there. I've been HR director on a club I did for fun. I've participated in the Spectrum Center events, which is for LGBTQ groups, and I've participated in some different like support groups that have helped me build community.
Well, that's insanely impressive and amazing. Thank you for sharing that and congratulations on all of that. A lot of big
Thank you.
course, a lot of big things there. I know noticed you mentioned getting you said an accessible door, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, actually, this episode's really mostly about disability, obstacles, services, just disabilities in general, that people maybe not be able to see or even know about. And, we're gonna get into all of that, but I just wanted to
Mhm.
know, like, thinking that that's an obstacle, what made you first feel inclined to make this accessible, more accessible? Like, how did you know
Yeah.
this was an issue?
So I had a person on my staff who was like, talking about like accessibility in the office, and I was like, yeah, is the office fully accessible? Like I know we talk about using accessible language, like we have presentations all the time on how to use accessible language. I gave a presentation, like my summer project last summer was on disability justice versus disability rights. And I gave a presentation on how we can incorporate disability justice and disability rights into our office. Um, so like I know we talk about it in our office, but we've never like talked about whether our office is accessible. And I'm like, this is something that I should have known before, but like, is it? And my one of my coworkers was like, I'm gonna look into it. So we started this project. It initially started with them like getting the door measured, and then they passed it off to me. And so the door was measured so it like fits. We know it fits a wheelchair, but ultimately we realize, like, when you're coming to an office to solve a conflict, like it's a conflict resolution office, you shouldn't meet another conflict when you come to the front door. So we were like, we have to make this accessible. Part of it is I was reading a book, Year of the Tiger by Alice Wong, who's a really well-known disability activist. And she was talking about how one of the things that she considers every time she walks or she goes outside is like when she leaves her house, will the place she's going to like have a door open? Will they have a machine operated door? Will someone hold the door for her so that she can get through on her wheelchair? So when I read her book, I started thinking about like, oh my gosh, like our office, we don't always have the door open. We need to make sure people can get through, and that's why I work to make the door accessible.
Thank you. I would love that you also saw that, yourself being like, this is a, place for people to come to,
Right.
figure out problems, and then they have another. I love that you mentioned that, because I
Yeah.
actually, now, of course, I recognize this is, nowhere near having a long-term disability, or, it was just for a
Uh-huh.
little bit, like just recently I broke my foot, right? And I
Right.
couldn't walk for a few months, and, my campus is unfortunately very inaccessible. So I was just like walking upstairs in crutches, like it
Yeah.
was just insane. And
Yeah.
I just saw, I realized, I was like, wait a minute, this is the first time I actually realized like I don't really see any disabled people around here. Like I realized, I was like, wow, like I have so much privilege, I don't even notice that. Like I didn't
Yeah,
realize how,
exactly.
right, like I didn't realize how hard it was to even, get around until I broke my foot. And so, that's what really got me, really interested in learning about this and trying to connect with someone that might, have way more to offer, since I'm just now learning about it. But yeah, one of the things you talked about was, you said disability justice versus disability rights. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So obviously I'm not an expert. I have taken classes on it and I've read about it a lot and I'm very passionate about it. But basically, disability rights is fighting for like rights like the ADA, accessibility, that sort of thing. And disability justice is fighting for liberation of disabled bodies. And it's fighting for liberation of every body mind, which is like the body and the mind as an interconnected um, experience, and it's fighting for everybody in general. So the movement of disability justice was created by, and I am blanking on their names, but it was created by queer, trans people of color who are disabled, and they want that movement to continue to be led by people who are people of color, are queer and trans, are disabled. They don't want it to be like co-opted like disability rights has been by a lot of cishet able-bodied men or cishet disabled men. So it's sort of a movement that like it has 10 tenets or 10 principles that say things like what we're fighting for with disability justice, such as like um, basically the principles that you don't leave anybody behind. It understands that like we have to fight outside of capitalism. Everybody is worthy, sort of things like that. And that's what disability justice is. And that's why I really respect disability justice.
Yeah, I actually, never really heard about that distinction until just now. So I'm,
Yeah,
I love that you brought that up, because that, I think, is with a lot of movements in general, just how often so many different movements get co-opted by privileged people, or at least the privileged of
exactly.
those groups. Yes. And, it
Yeah.
creates, even a smaller space for the other ones trying to join. I like that you brought that up. And I also remember you brought up, just you said body and mind, and that actually started to make me think there are a lot of disabilities that are almost like just not visual or silent, like people don't know somebody's disabled. So I wanted to actually talk about that, because I know there's disabilities, physical disabilities, where you can't, you're not able-bodied, you can't physically
Mhm.
walk or do certain things. But then there's also, of course, mental disabilities. And I know a lot of people focus on the more common things like depression and anxiety, but I also know there are a lot of different kinds. So I was wondering, have you ever, kind of seen, I guess my question is, when it comes to the silent disabilities that people don't really
Mhm.
see, off jump, have you noticed that there might be more of a community there, or less of a community, or do people feel, comfortable enough to talk about that? Or have you seen other ways that people with silent, disabilities, are just aren't able to really find community or talk about it?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. Like as someone, I've called it invisible disabilities, but I like your term of silent disability too. Um, struggle to find community, and I think it takes a little bit more work. But it also, I want to recognize that as someone who, like, I have invisible disabilities, like both physical and mental disabilities. I am privileged because I'm a lot less likely to be like harassed on the street or anything. I'm more able passing. But it does make it harder to find communities. One thing that I've found really helpful is support groups. So I've done like a couple different outpatient support groups through therapy for different like mental illnesses and mental health issues that has been really supportive. So I've done ones that are like open to anyone with depression, anxiety. I've done some that are like um, depression, anxiety, and then also like other issues, and that I fit into those categories as well. And then I've done some like support groups for like survivors of sexual assault, where a lot of people there have PTSD, and that creates it's a very difficult environment, but it like creates a good community of support for people. And I think those environments are important to find. Like, and I realize now, like, it's hard to find the right support group. Like I joined this one support group that was for LGBTQ plus people with chronic pain, and I was super excited about it, and it was very much not the right fit for me. So I really want to validate how you're so right about it's really challenging to find that community, because um, sometimes you're going to join a group and maybe they won't be like, people might not be as validating, or people might use terms you don't like. For me, they use the term pain warriors, and I don't want to be considered a warrior. I'm just trying to live my life. I don't want to be fighting this pain every day. Like I don't want to be compared to like a soldier or something like that. I just want to be a person. So I didn't like being called the pain warrior, and that's why I left the group. But I think there have been so many great outlets of spaces where disabled people come together. And I'm still looking to build more community as I exit college. But I found a lot of great spaces through support groups.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do think that some people think that, I think that's the whole point of trying to find community, is that it's okay if you like, try and then try again and it's still you're not finding them yet. Like I think that's just life, honestly, because whether it's a very focused goal or focused kind of group, or just trying to find a friend group, you vibe with them, you don't, you move on. And
Yeah,
I really want to encourage anyone watching or listening to please continue to try to find community, because the whole point of this podcast is about
absolutely.
it's about connection. People need people, whether, it doesn't matter what those people look like or, mean to you, but you just need people, and I just feel like we're stronger in numbers. But as you were talking about that, I actually wanted to talk, and we can first start with where we just left off with the invisible disability, which is, please, thank you. That was what I was trying to find. I was like, I know the word, but I couldn't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but we can start off with the invisible disabilities. But what are some of the most common obstacles you either faced yourself or have seen or have heard be kind of a common obstacle for people with invisible disabilities outside of just support groups and trying to find community?
Definitely, I think what we've already covered is a big one, but I think another one is um, people making assumptions about you. So, for instance, it's really hurtful when someone says something like, "You're not disabled. You look like you're not disabled." Well, what does disability look like? You can't assume anyone is disabled or non-disabled, because we don't know what disability looks like. Disability doesn't look one way. Um, Additionally, I think it's really one of the big things is when someone takes the elevator instead of the stairs, or when someone sits down on a public transportation or something like that. I know a lot of people who get angry. They're like, that person is sitting down and they don't have a disability, or that person is taking the elevator one flight of stairs and they could have walked. Like, you don't actually know. Invisible disabilities exist. We need to stop like assessing the people around each other, and instead focus on our own lives and how we can help each other. There's these things that are part of care of disability justice, which is called care networks, where we basically provide resources for each other. And it's sort of like community services, community health, community care. So it's this idea that like if someone needs groceries one day, another disabled person might go get them for it. And then one day that person might need medicine and the other person might bring them to that. And it's not charity, it's support for each other. So that's something that I try to think of often as a solution to a lot of these barriers, is like visible disability people might have problems come up in the form of pain, in the form of inability to like get healthcare or doctor's appointments, like all of the same things that like disabled people deal with on the regular, of like we're dealing with ableism in our society. We're dealing with like all the other systemic problems that a person might deal with based on their identity. So we have to work as a community to take care of each other.
And before I ask about, some of the obstacles that come with, being, I guess, physically disabled, I want to, I really want to ask, you said that an example of how you guys support each other was going out and buying food for each other, or which I think is also amazing, especially in times where like we just came back, we had a pandemic where,
Yeah.
a lot of people had to use, sources like that if they were sick or if they're
Yeah.
compromised or whatever. But are there other ways that maybe you haven't covered that, you guys also support each other? Because first of all, I think that's really sweet and amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a big one is that I think it depends on the people's level of care needs and access needs. But some people will have care attendants, some people will have just have other people who come support them. Some people will have times where they need like GoFundMe's or resources sent to them just to like make ends meet um, for medical bills because healthcare is really expensive, or for whatever they need. And just trying to like, as a disabled person, know like, or at least I try, like at some point this could be me. So like if I have the money, I'm gonna try and donate to that. Like just trying to support why am I blanking on the word? It's fine. I'll remember it like later.
If you ever need like a couple seconds, like don't worry, I can always edit out like the breaks. Like don't
Oh,
even worry. Like
perfect.
let me
Okay, thank
know.
you.
So we can move on,
Yeah.
but you just let me know if you ever need a break. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Mutual aid. Yeah, trying to support like mutual aids.
That's amazing. I wanted to see, I think this is actually something I've also asked in some of the other episodes, because I'm trying to figure out ways people can like actually try to help people without just, posting like an
Mhm,
infographic on
mhm.
Instagram. So I feel like there's the ways you just said, like this is simple as that. If you maybe have like a neighbor, if you know someone who
Yeah,
I
exactly.
personally, yeah, like I personally have a really close family member who, is disabled right now. And I've honestly just seen how beautiful it is to that even in her like older age, all of her best friends growing up come over every single day, take care of her,
Mhm,
her food,
mhm.
like nobody, they always check in on her, and that's
Mm.
something that makes me feel, if that ever happened to me, I would want to feel like I have people by my side. But
Right.
yeah, moving on to some of the obstacles I think physically disabled people face, I wanted to talk
Uh-huh.
more about that, not just about ramps or maybe doors, but are there some other obstacles people don't even really think about, because that was my experience. Like I just started learning
Right.
all these different things and I was like, wow, like why don't I know
Right.
more about this? But yeah.
Yeah, I think ramps and doors are big ones, especially like people with like mobility aids will have issues with those. I think one thing that's been an issue for me is like I um I have a physical disability, but it's invisible, as I mentioned. But I live in Michigan now, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So now I moved to a place where it's very snowy, and like the sidewalks need to be clear for people with mobility aids. So if you use like a wheelchair or a cane, it's important to clear the sidewalks. That said, I live in a part of town where my sidewalks aren't clear. I thought that would be fine because I don't use mobility aids at this current time. I might in the future. Unfortunately, navigating the very snowy, icy sidewalks is really, really painful for me. And for a lot of people, it can be dangerous if you slip or you fall. It can cause more injuries. So that's one big thing, is the change in weather. Also, just weather in general often makes my body, like, the pain act up. Um, so that's a big barrier. I also think other barriers are like buildings that like have slants. Like I have a friend whose mom is coming to graduation and she's nervous about coming because she needs total knee replacement, but the entire building is like on a slant like this. And so that, like, walking downhill can be really hard. I think there are a lot of really big barriers out there, a lot of really big obstacles that people face that, like, you the hard thing is that people oftentimes don't really think about these things or have empathy for these things until you experience it, and that's really unfortunate. And I'm really grateful for when people do start to understand, but I wish that people like learned about these things earlier, which is why I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to take a couple disability studies classes in college, and I learned a lot from that. But I think it's really important to like start considering what other people's experiences are.
I agree. I think education around this is essential. I think it's insane that I had to learn about this way later in life. But you're
Yeah.
right. That's the biggest part, is people don't think about it until it happens to them,
Mhm.
or somebody that brings it to their attention. Um,
Right, exactly.
yeah, and like, and going off of that, I'm just wondering, with you, have there ever been times where you've tried to kind of, like, for example, all the obstacles you mentioned, whether it was clean sidewalks, ramps, doors, changes in weather, any other like comments or terms you don't like to hear, have ever been times where you try to bring this to someone's attention or try to get assistance for any of these different obstacles, and either you just got shot down or it was just something you had to kind of leave alone?
Yeah, yeah. So I think a big one is like if you've ever gone to a building where there's like the elevator is closed and then you have to take the stairs, like that's pretty hard, but you can't really do much about it. But one that sticks out to me is, so before I was a psychology student, I was a nursing student, and that I didn't love. I changed for a lot of reasons, but one of them being I experienced what honestly was some ableism from my professors, like a lot of me pointing out ableism in their language, in calling people outdated terms, not people, but like patients, like hypothetical patients, or like reading sections of the textbooks, and rather than like critiquing and being like, we don't use this language anymore, they were just like, this is what we do, that sort of thing, and not really taking from the lived experience of people who have disabilities, which I think is so important. But the main thing that happened is it was like, well, the pandemic is still like sort of ongoing. It was like amidst the like like when we were quarantining. Um, and we still had class in person because this was nursing school. And so they said we're still learning, like, like no one else had class in person, but nurses did, at least at my school, because they wanted us to get hands-on experience. So we had 2 in-person labs, and I am immunocompromised. And I asked to, like, I was wearing my mask, obviously, and I asked to um, distance from each other, like at least 6 feet. And they said, no, we can't do that. If you want to be a nurse, you're going to be around people who have diseases. And I said, oh, well, I didn't sign up to be exposed to this yet. Like, it was in a lab where we were working on Sims, like dolls. Um, and then one where we were just like learning skills. And I was like, this is in the midst of the pandemic. Like, I'm not a nurse yet. Like, can we please just socially distance? And they said no. So then I wrote a professor an email about right before I got my clinical placement. And I said, hey, I just wanted to know if I could get some accommodations or if I could learn like at least a little bit more about the nursing program before I get my clinical placement because I'm immunocompromised. This might be a little hard for me, and I might have to have some like adjustments for my schedule because of my disability. And the response was, maybe you should have gone into a different career.
Yeah, all of that was just honestly insane for me to hear, considering you're in nursing and you're literally learning about all the ways to be
Yeah.
responsible in I guess I'm sorry. I guess I just really didn't expect that. I
Yeah, I didn't expect it either. I sobbed so hard. I eventually left nursing, and I am happy I did because I think my dream ultimately changed, and I'm a lot happier now. I want to be involved in community organizing. Like I'm using psychology to do more like social justice things, whereas like in nursing, I wanted to change the system. Like I wanted to change the like healthcare system, but it's really hard to change the healthcare system from inside the system. So now I want to be able to like what I'm doing now is like working outside of the system.
No, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm so sorry.
Thank
I
you.
truly, I really don't understand how. I think honestly, I've had this conversation with a lot of different people. I really just don't. I don't think people understand just how hard it is to be a nurse. Like it is so
Yeah.
hard. Like you have to know just as much information, but do pretty much all the work. And so it's just, and then on top of that, you're treated terribly.
Yeah.
Nobody really, checks or looks out for you, especially if you're
Right.
trying to, and then on top of that, I just think it's insane that in the height, of course, we're still in the pandemic, but in the height of it, where
Yeah.
people, especially someone who's immunocompromised, how they could just dismiss that, considering
Right.
that it's a very dangerous,
Yeah.
situation to be in. So I'm just
Yeah.
genuinely surprised by that. But no, that's something I totally agree. I think when you talked about trying to change the system from inside, that's why I'm also in psychology actually too. But
Yes.
yeah,
Nice.
that was the biggest reason I didn't want to go into like politics or other things, just because I
Right.
wanted to just be able to safely say what I want to say without having to worry about my
Exactly.
job. Exactly.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
love that you brought that up because that is so real. I don't think people think about that enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, so having to make that decision. I know you said that you were sobbing, but how were you able to even finally be able to just say, okay, like I'm just gonna have to move on and like find something else that might pursue my like and just pursue other interests of mine. How were you able to come to that conclusion?
I ended up like having to get like professional mental health treatment. Like I ended up in the hospital because it was like kind of a mental breakdown. But when I came out, I was like, doing really intense therapy with my therapist, and I was like, I'm miserable. I'm ready for a change. I think I need to change majors. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks into the second semester of sophomore year. And so I was like, it's too late. I can't do it. And they were like, no, you have to do this. Like if you want to do it, you got to do it now. So met with some really nice advisors, and I got it changed, and I didn't look back.
No, if anyone's listening to this, I also like want to second that. You need like my siblings I have a brother that changes major a bunch of times, and
Mhm.
I could not imagine him in the first major at all. So
Yes, yeah,
it's just something you got to go through. But I'm glad you came to that conclusion, and I'm so happy, to hear that, because I feel like that's also the biggest fear for people is they don't know how they're gonna bounce back from like,
exactly.
one version of themselves kind of
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
So yeah. But no, going like continuing, off of that, I wanted to ask, like, when you were talking about these things and kind of change and just some of the feedback you've gotten, and some ways that you were, I guess, kind of like, what's the word? Just ignored or just not taken seriously. What are some ways on a more positive aspect, maybe,
Yes,
that
yes.
you were able to what's it called, that you were able to get the help you needed, people heard you, maybe even some other things started to change in reaction to that, like what are some good things that happened from your advocacy or from you just kind of talking about how you feel?
I think like it's been really good to be able to like share my feelings and my experiences because I've been able to hear other people's feelings and experiences. And I think especially in the Midwest where I don't know if this is a common thing, but it seems like in the Midwest, like people are raised very polite and maybe are a little uncomfortable with talking about emotions and feelings and hard things. And I'm not from the Midwest. And I'm like, let's talk about it. Um, And so I think my experiences led to a lot of really hard but really important conversations. And then also I I've had a lot of really hard stuff happen to me, like medically wise. And each time I learn a little bit more about myself and a little bit more about what matters to me. And while it sucks and I'm angry, I think I learn more about how to advocate for myself. And then there's always the plus side, which I think is really good, of when you find someone who has a similar experience with you. So like recently I've been encountering, I guess in the past couple years of college, like encountering friends of friends or new friends or just random people and finding out that they have conditions that are similar to yours, and then being able to talk to them about that and being like, oh my gosh, I tried this medication when I was 10. And they're like, I tried that medication when I was 9. Wasn't it painful? That sort of thing. Or like having people who just went through diagnosis, and you can use your experiences that you already know to assist someone who's in the process of just the beginning stages of their diagnosis. I think that is what I have used as like, that is more of my positive side of this, is being able to be there for the relationships and be there for the people and making friends. Like just last week, I was hanging out at it was my friend's birthday, and one of her friends came up and she mentioned that she didn't want to come out because of some like autoimmune condition. And it turned out that we had the same autoimmune disease. And I was like, see it like this, it's just like it's cool to have that understanding where we could meet each other. We didn't know much about each other, but we understood like where we were coming from, and that's pretty cool.
No, I love to hear that. That's exactly even me. I still have a hard time talking about, my mental illness, of
Mhm.
talking about depression, anxiety, whatever. It's hard because, I just grew up in we talked about mental health in a different episode, but like you said, like connecting with people is great because personally I grew up in an area where you don't talk
Yeah,
about that, like
yeah,
very stigmatized, very much,
uh-huh.
you need to trust in God and you can't be talking about, anything else because it seems like you don't trust God. So it's just, now I feel like I'm in this kind of day and age, I feel like people are starting to be more comfortable with it. It's starting
Right.
to become a little more normalized. People just kind
Mhm.
of are like, especially in college when you're talking with other
Mhm.
students who are just like, "Oh, I'm depressed or I'm anxious. I don't care," or whatever, It feels good because I don't, you don't feel like you're the odd one out or that you have a
Exactly.
problem that is just you or that you should feel
Yeah,
guilty about. So I love that you brought that up. And that's why community is so important. So you can just feel,
it's so important.
yeah,
Yeah,
just feel normal. And when I say normal, it doesn't even mean like there's no real definition of normal. It's whatever it means for you. So to just feel normal with other people, be like, this
yeah,
is fine. Like this is okay.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I actually wanted to ask more about, some things people can do to support, disabled people or movements or um
Uh-huh.
uh just kind of actions or legislations even. What are some things that people, everyday people can do? Because if we're being realistic, not everyone wants to join, a whole group or wants to, fight the good fight or whatever. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah,
right.
yeah, I
And
totally understand.
exactly. And at the same time, though, sometimes posting can only do so much. So what do you think are some, realistic or, even tangible ways people can help make a difference in this specific area?
I think definitely one big thing, like people are on social media all the time. And if your feed is all non-disabled people, that's a problem. Like you should be following disabled activists. There are like so many people out there. Alice Wong is a big one, Mia Mingus, some Leia, I don't know how to pronounce their last name. There are a lot of people out there who are like really wonderful activists who you should be following, um just like so that you it's important to hear disabled voices. Just like in any conversation, we shouldn't be centering the voices of people who aren't affected by the problem. And not saying disability is a problem, saying that like we should be centering the voices of the people who are affected by this. And so I think that includes like consuming media created by disabled people, whether that's watching movies with accurate disabled representation. And that means not disability like with all the disabled stereotypes. So oftentimes there's a stereotype of like the weak disabled person who can't do anything, or like this disabled person who's just like taken advantage of, that sort of thing. Like I want to see all kinds of disabled representation. I want like people who are actually disabled to be playing these disabled characters. Like that is what you should be consuming, and reading books by disabled authors, just like any other group of marginalized people. Like we need to be incorporating marginalized voices into our lives. And then also I think a big one is just advocating when you hear anything come up, advocating for your friends, advocating for disabled people around you. I'm a big proponent of healthcare for all, because one of the big issues that that disabled people face is Social Security and healthcare benefits not being able to cover, like basically there's a certain amount of like funds you can have, and if you pass that much, like you can't qualify for disability anymore. And it's really tricky, and it means that a lot of people live with very little wages and don't have enough money to live. So if we had healthcare for all, we would be a lot more successful as a group of people. So maybe if you do want to lobby for some legislation, think about that. Otherwise, I think just advocating for one thing that is like accessibility, like doctor's office tables that are accessible, that can be lowered down. Like think about accessibility everywhere where you are. Like how would a person use this if they had a wheelchair, like in your office or in your school, and advocate for that. And I think that's a way to help.
Those are all great and very doable.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, like I really don't even think, except for like obviously lobbying for legislation, maybe that might be
Right.
but,
That's a big one.
yeah, but everything else is so doable. And that's what I think really makes me so confused about why this is such a big issue still, because it doesn't seem like that far out of reach at all. Like
Right.
it's very
Right.
something you could implement tomorrow, and I
Exactly.
think do you think, I have a question though, actually, because
Yes.
I wonder if this is something maybe other people might think too. Do you think ever that it might be an issue of like budgeting or something of any, like, buildings or just anywhere? Do you think that maybe that like people can't afford to make things super accessible for everyone? Because I think
Yeah,
that
so this is actually something that like I ran into when trying to make the door accessible at my office. Is but like some buildings have like the ADA fund attached to them, so they're a general fund building, which means that like the ADA will, like if it doesn't meet ADA requirements, the ADA general fund will pay to meet those ADA requirements. And some buildings, like if you don't have the ADA general fund attached to that building, then you will have to go to other like avenues to try and get that money to pay to make it accessible. So we had a really long issue with trying to get the door accessible in my office, because at first we thought it wasn't a general fund building. So we were trying to find like scholarships or like grants or something to pay for the door. We're trying to find ways to get it because we didn't have money in our budget to pay for it, and it would have come out of our budget instead of the school. And so finally we figured out a way to get it used as a general fund building, which is just paid for by the ADA fund.
Okay. So I feel like, do you know at all? I mean, this obviously, if you don't, it's totally fine, but do you know at all if you said the ADA like general fund, if that's something that most buildings have access to, or is there like certain requirements that are like, I guess, what's the word? Trends you see with like certain kinds of buildings or in certain areas that might have access to that or don't, and like maybe that's why some are more accessible than others.
Yeah, I think like I don't really know a ton about it. But as far as I know, I think it's more of the like, does your school have like a union or like a space that's like really common space? Like that building should be like general fund. Um, like the buildings that are like federal property or like government property, those should be the buildings where a ton of people, like school buildings, a lot of them should be This is just based on my little bit of knowledge I got from meeting with a couple people. I don't know a ton on the subject, but it maybe not. It's like a house isn't going to be one. Like maybe not a smaller business, that sort of thing.
Okay. Have you, by any chance, yourself or met people that have not been able to find any money, whether that was through the fund or through scholarships and grants, and just had to kind of like let it go with whatever building they're trying to make more accessible?
I haven't met them that experience, but I think like when I know of people who have like had to fundraise for it, or like have GoFundMe's or that sort of thing to get accessibility, but I haven't met anyone who was let go. It's possible if that's happened though.
Right, right. No, I mean, hearing all this makes me think that, one solution could be that before you even, finish building the building, you make it accessible. But also,
Yeah, exactly.
but also, even if that's not the case, I feel like, like you said, like there's so many ways to find a way to make it more accessible. So
Mhm.
I think, to me, I don't know. I guess for me, I always wonder like why this is still such a, like I said like multiple times throughout this is that I don't really understand how it's still a hang up if a lot of people are asking for it. Have in your experience, have you also kind of like what are, I guess for me, leaving like all the, specific and, like financial and, political or social issues aside,
Mhm.
what are some like, I guess, more, well, not just social issues, but what are some ways, or some, sorry, give me, I'm gonna have to edit this part out too, because sometimes I get terrified. But when you're with other people who are disabled, whether that's an invisible disability or not, what are just some more like, I guess, less, God, I need to word this right. Maybe what are some issues you face that aren't specifically due to just your body or to how the assumptions people say about assumptions people make about you, or the like physical limitations you have? What are
Right.
some things, I guess, within your own community, besides just having the difference between like the justice and rights, where you have the cis het men kind of
Mhm.
controlling this, and then you want to have more POC, et cetera, diversity. What are some other issues you find within your own community that you would like to be brought up or have more attention and awareness to? Because I think that's something I've noticed within social movements is because you want to come as a strong, like collective group of people or a strong front, it's kind of scary to talk about the issues within that group. I know, like
Mhm.
for me personally, if like let's say I'm just talking about, you know, being black, sometimes a lot of people don't want to start talking about issues with being black and LGBTQ plus, or being black
Right.
and, because then it would take attention away from trying to fight for black liberation, and we don't
Mhm.
afford that, you know what I mean? So do you ever like face that at all? Do you think that that's
Oh,
something?
I think, yeah, I totally resonate with that. I think, like, obviously, there's a lot of issues with like assumptions made about people being like disabled, meaning certain things, or there's issues with healthcare, there's issues with structures, there's all those issues that you mentioned. But then, as far as what you're asking about, like within the group, I think a, a lot of times what I've noticed is there are people who like might be disabled in some way and think this is just an observation. I'm not saying everyone does this, but might think that that gives them an excuse to be maybe a little problematic in another way. They're like, I can't be harmful to this group of people because I'm disabled. And I'm like, well, no, actually, like, if you are white, you are still like you're being racist. Doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. Or like if you are a man and you're disabled, you're still being sexist, even if you're disabled, like that sort of thing. So that still does exist in the disabled community. And I think that's something that is ongoing. But a big thing that is being worked on is fighting for all disabled people. And that's what disability justice does, is remembering that like we're not we're not giving up this fight when just like with his white disabled man. I don't know, I just made up Tom. But when Tom is liberated from the societal issues, like, no, we're not fighting for Tom, we're fighting for everyone, you know?
No, exactly. I thank you. That's something I've always wondered with like most movements in general, just because I think that's what's so frustrating about. That's what we talk about intersectionality a lot. And I can't even imagine how hard it is to be disabled and Black and poor. You know what I mean? Like that must be a lot, many more hurdles. You know what I mean? But actually talking about that, I also think, financially, like, I can see how much, or I can only assume how much easier it would be to be disabled with a lot of money compared to being
Mhm.
disabled with no money. Like you said, you don't have access to healthcare or social security or
Yeah.
certain things that might actually like genuinely mean
Right.
life or death, or even just quality of life, like overall quality of life. Are there some movements or groups or certain things that you have been a part of, heard of, or hope to join that might actually help with the financial side of, assisting people with disabilities, except instead of just like a GoFundMe, but like actually being able to maybe have certain programs in place to especially thinking about maybe people who are homeless with disabilities, like
Mhm.
how does that work? How do they get the services they need if they
Right.
just like financially can't afford it?
That's a big problem, I think, that you brought up, as people who don't have a house, who have disabilities, especially because the way that we currently treat unhoused people is we just kind of abandon them. Like, we don't have the support or the resources we need for them. That's so messed up. I don't really know of any services that directly provide support for like housing. I've always been a person who just gives money, like through mutual aid, directly to the people, because I think like they know best how to solve their own issues rather than like say, I think it's great to give to like UNICEF or something, but UNICEF isn't in the community necessarily and doesn't know exactly what the community is dealing with. So I would give to the members in the community who know what the community needs. This is just my view, and what I do, but I'm sure that if you were to like do a little bit of digging, they would totally be able to find some organization that is helping with assistance of financial things, because there are so many financial needs out there, especially with like different medical devices, different like diets that people need to have, different like making houses accessible. Like, I don't know about you, but my house has 2 sets of stairs. Like, I live in a crummy college house that is way too expensive, but the cheapest that I could find. And I have many roommates, but it has 2 sets of stairs to get to the bathroom. So I had a friend come to my house one time, and he had crutches because he hadn't had knee surgery. And like, how is he going to get to the bathroom? That sort of thing. Like, you have to make your house accessible. So paying for that and paying for all of those things, like, that's a lot of money you're spending. So yeah.
No, I love that you brought up the idea of actually trying to like directly funnel money into the community or your own community, because I'm not saying that like, all organizations are corrupt and that you can't trust
No,
them.
no, 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 no. I agree. Right.
But you also don't know where it's going right away. Like I think there is a big benefit to, of course, still funding those, groups and organizations, but also trying
Absolutely.
to, like you said, like just connect with the people around you. And I also, before one last thing I want to talk about was just I also want to talk about the, instead of just talking about invisible disabilities and then physical disabilities, but also how they kind of come hand in hand. Like I've
Yeah.
noticed that people with physical disabilities end up either developing, or they just kind of have or already have mental illnesses that are exacerbated
Mhm.
from that, the frustration of not being able to do
Yeah.
certain things. And even me, like, again, not as big a deal, but even me, when I couldn't get to the bathroom, or I couldn't get to my class, or it took me like 3 times as long to do certain things, I just got so it got very hard to just focus on school and do this and that. I was just exhausted overall. It was a lot. I can't even imagine what that is all day,
Right.
for
Right.
years, the entire life. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that before, we end this. But for you, like, have you have you been able, do you think people put as much of an importance of getting like kind of like mental health counseling as an addition to those devices or those physical like dire needs at all?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Like, definitely there is a huge co-occurrence of mental illness with physical disabilities. However, like I think it's taken a lot less seriously. Um, just based on the stigma around mental illness, I think, there's this idea that we treat the physical illness and then the mental health side. We don't yet see it as an illness that needs to be treated. And I think there's a lot of stigma, especially around illnesses that aren't just like, I think that social media is sort of destigmatizing depression and anxiety. But like when I talk about my illnesses I have that are not depression and anxiety, I still get responses of like people who are like, what? And I'm like, we gotta still just destigmatize all of these things, like, um, and I think that we need to talk about things bigger than just going to therapy. Like we have to talk about like deep, like structural changes. Like therapy is important, but also not everyone can afford therapy. Um, so we have to like really change the whole system, which I know me saying is great, but like, how do we do that? We're working on it. But I think that it is really important to consider all parts of the body and the mind. It's just sometimes it's hard to take care of the mind when people don't really understand how important that is.
I'm sorry, can you hear the bells in the back? One sec.
No.
Okay, good. Because I was like, they go off a lot, and I just did not want. No, but going back to what you said, I
Yeah.
100% agree. I actually was even. I remember I was able to speak with someone who considered themselves an abolitionist because that
Mhm.
is kind of you do have to change the system. That is why so many
Yeah.
sociology majors are going insane because they just
Yeah.
realized we got to reset everything, and so
Right.
it's like, and it's a scary idea to be like, well, how are you, whoa, like people don't are scared of change, it's not
Right.
convenient for them, but
Mhm.
I truly agree with that. I also think that, therapy is great, but it also seems like if there are so many problems and therapy is just trying to kind of help you I feel like you should work on the root of the problem instead of trying to
Exactly.
just like,
Exactly.
help
Like,
you go through.
yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like if the problem is the fact that you can't afford your rent, like you can go to therapy and be like, I can't afford your rent. And your therapist can be like, let's talk about it. But you
Yeah,
still, at the end of therapy, can't afford your rent. So instead,
exactly.
what we should do is make like housing more affordable,
That's
you
what
know?
and we're both in psychology. Of course, we believe,
Yeah,
therapy, but like it gotta be realistic. Like you can't just that's not
right.
the answer to everything. So no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
We are getting around the time. Is there anything that you want to say, you want people to know, or you want people to hear before we end this?
I don't know. I think we covered everything. You had a lot of really good questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate this so much. I love being able to speak with you. I learned a lot, and this honestly just motivated me more to look into more of the things you were bringing up. I was
Yeah,
taking notes the entire time, so I really am going to look into all of
awesome.
that. But thank you so much for even taking the time out
Thank
to meet
you.
with me, and you had a lot of great things to say, and I wish you luck on everything that you've been
Thank you.
trying to
You
work on.
too.
Thank
Yeah.
you. But yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.